Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner and to a Cardfight Vanguard retro deck profile. As you can probably tell by what we have on the mat here, this is in fact Brawler, Big Bang, Knuckle Buster. We're going to be going back to a simpler time for Vanguard, even more simple than Overdress and Early V, in the form of Legion Era. Paper Legion Era, to be exact, because, well, playing around in Legion Era for Zero has made me feel a little nostalgic towards a deck that I currently have built for that. Brawlers, go figure, Narukami stands playing Narukami, but yeah, Brawlers are a deck type that I was really excited to get my hands on into Zero because, well, they're one of my favorite deck archetypes to come in Vanguard, period, truth be told. Like, when it comes to Narukami archetypes, they're probably in my top 3 alongside Vermilion in full Bronto. Like, that's how much I adore these guys. Like, I think their playstyle and their look are just so fun. Like, punching the board was such a satisfying feeling back in the day. Like, there was just nothing really quite going attack, many things die with your Vanguard attack that just makes you go, ooh, that's pretty cool. Not to mention the sheer look of these guys too. It was just something I've always liked. Like, these are DBZ characters, but dragons that punch with lightning. How is that not fucking awesome? Like, when you break it down to stuff like that, you go, oh wow, this deck's pretty cool. And then you actually play with the deck, and at least in paper format, you go, oh, this could have been a lot better. Because, you see, the difference between paper format and Zero format is the value of intercepts being, well, what they are. Like, in paper format, intercepts matter a whole lot less when you got handguards and Zero triggers that have shield values of 10,000 and whatnot. So the big power columns that you would make with the Big Bang Knuckle Buster deck are a lot easier to guard, and particularly the Paladin decks could just rebuild their boards for not a lot of trouble. So you punch in their board every turn wasn't really as impactful. Resist units didn't exist at the time, so the value of being able to get through anti-retire mattered a whole lot less. Therefore, Perdition Dragons was arguably the better of the 2 Dragon Empire Legion decks at the time. Plus, you had a restand in the Great, and Dragon could deal damage. And of course, this is a format where the best decks either had restanding in the form of Seekers and Revengers, or Guard Restrict in the form of Liberators, because in this format, Guard Restrict works a lot differently. Instead of discarding a grade 3 to guard, it's just you can't use PGs, so you have to guard with anything other than, no, it's grade 1 or higher, correct. And so you can only guard with triggers and your intercepts. And Glare could, if you stuck a Bruno behind Glare, it could get pretty big. That's why Regalia just died once Metalborgs and Liberators came in, because they just could do what Yggdrasil could do, but more consistently. So that's the format in a nutshell. Brawlers would get better in time because of strides. Conquest Dragon in particular paired nicely with this guy, because Conquest didn't require you to kill a card to get the buff, and he buffed your front row by 5k for every open front row rearguard circle, so you punish your opponent for not committing a board, which is nice. And then Turbo came around to just wipe the board out entirely, and yeah, and this ended up being like the best Nara variant for a very long time. So with that being said, yeah, let's just take a trip down memory lane and go over Brawlers for old format. Because this is old format, some cards you might be used to seeing in Zero format will not be around, and I'll mention the ones that are here. But as for the starters, you do in fact play the same starter as you would in Zero, which is Sparky Dragoon, because being able to fetch your grade 3s for Knuckle Buster's effect is pretty good. Grade 3s don't count as triggers, so you don't mind pulling them out. And he helps build Soul for Rising Phoenix and Big Bang Knuckle Dragon. Then for the grade 3s, 4 copies of Brawler, Big Bang Knuckle Buster, and 4 copies of Brawler, Big Bang Knuckle Dragon. You don't need to play any other grade 3s. Link Joker was awful in this format because, let's see, what was it? Right, when intercepts don't matter in this format, locking them is far less impactful, and Link Joker for a very long time in paper format basically lived and died by how playable Chaos Breaker Dragon was, and CBD wasn't good in this format, therefore Link Joker wasn't good. The leaders weren't good, and Messiah wasn't good for a very long time. Chaos would get better once GBD 5 came around, and that's just a bit of a heads up. Zero players, hang on to your Chaos Breakers because they will be playable in the future. But anyway, getting sidetracked here. As far as these guys go, they function more or less the same as you'd know, like Big Bang Knuckle Dragon in Legion Counterblast 2 to get 5k in front row attack. He is a Brawler Counterblast block, so I've had to adjust some of my cards in here to have as many Brawler names as possible. And when he attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 to get 3k instead of just on attack 2k, which actually does matter as you can make magic numbers with TCG Big Bang Knuckle Dragon. And then Knuckle Buster is pretty much the same as well. Counterblast 1 while in Legion, put a Big Bang Knuckle unit from your hand to soul to get 5k and the ability to attack 4 units. You do not draw, which is one of the big differences between this card and the insanity that is Zero Buster and why he's getting nerfed. But his other effects are the same. You get Crossride status, which was actually pretty important for guarding some side columns, as Crossrides were long out of the meta at this point. So people couldn't really build their proper columns, and I'm pretty certain a good number of clans just didn't play 12k attackers anymore. So it was mostly 16 columns that you could guard with your 5k shields. And yeah, not much else to really say here. You just played your good grade 3s. So moving on to the grade 2s. Your selection is not as potent as it is in other formats, as in English we didn't get Stormbrain Dragon or Plasma Claw Dragon, so we didn't have access to our grade 3 Searcher grade 2, our Countercharger grade 2, so your options were to play Garuda in that aspect. But instead, we just played Skyhowl Dragon instead, because Skyhowl in this format is Counterblast 1 pop or front row units, and while intercepts don't matter as much in this format compared to Zero, it's still one more card being removed from the board, and alongside Big Bang Knuckle Buster, allowed you to kill 5 units. No, not kill 5 units, but like, you could kill 4 units in one turn versus not having this, and Knuckle Buster only kills 3 units. It just allowed your arc to power up a bit better, which mattered because he was your best booster. And then these guys are the same. And yeah, SP of this guy, because that was the only one I was able to find. They didn't. Now, if I remember correctly, if you got a Legion leader in a box, you would pull the mate. SPs were a different story. You could just pull an SP Legion or an SP mate. Yeah, I think that's how it worked. Basically, it was much more difficult to pull higher rarity versions of your Legions. Legion rares were different. Like, if you pulled a Legion rare, you got it in the mate in the same foiling, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I don't think that was the case for SPs. Then moving on to the grade 1s, for PGs. PGs, doesn't matter which one you play. There was never a Brawler PG, so you could either play this gold or the Eradicator one, and I went with this one because early Vanguard double rares have a different foil pattern compared to the ones that we have now, which is something I actually do miss. Like, I liked how foiling looked back in the day versus the now same foiling that we have for everything. Same goes for rares too. Then 4 arcs, you have the space to play these because you're not filling your deck with extra grade 3s for triggers and whatnot. And yeah, just the 3 arcs. I was never really able to find a 4th one. This guy was hard as hell to pull. And like, I forget how many boxes of Legion of Dragon the Blades we got here at my locals at the time, but I remember we went through all of them and we could only get these 3 from all the boxes, and that was all I was able to come up with. I could have ordered some, but back then I wasn't really as into ordering cards online for Vanguard, and probably should have. For Rising Phoenix, yeah, he's kind of good in this deck. Go figure. For Helena, this is definitely inspired by playing Zero. I wish I knew about this interaction. I knew about the usefulness of Helena in Legion, not Helena, of Rising Phoenix clones in Legion decks, but Helena I probably could have also used back then to filter some pretty bad cards out of my hand, and man, I wish I did. If I were to actually able to sit down and play retro format Legion games with my friends, yeah, I'm going to be doing this. And then finally Tukome, because yeah, Brawlers didn't really have a lot of good grade 1s to work with. The Desert Gunners don't really matter in this format as much. This could be the 10k attacker, or yeah, those are like the only other things you could play in here. Or I mean, you could play Eradicator Castor, not Castor, Pollux, but no, yeah, it's Castor. You could play Castor in here, but this guy is easier to get live more often just because of Skyhowl Dragon and the other game. And that's kind of it for the grade 1s. Kokon doesn't exist in this format because he was printed in the G set. Same for Tay-Rock, and that's why you don't see him in here. And then moving on to the big difference between this and Zero format is that triggers. You play 0 triggers instead of the grade 3 triggers and the 4 heal guards and whatnot. Instead you get all these triggers, and not much to really say here. In this format where drive checks actually go to your hand, crits are a lot better. I do think I should be playing more than 4 draw triggers, just because you are kind of dependent on drawing into your grade 3s in order to keep punching the board. So maybe I can cut one of these crits for another Brawler draw. Brawlers didn't have a second crit at this time. That also came in GBT5 in the form of, oh, I forget his name, but it's the one that goes back into the deck to give one of your units the ability to get 3k whenever your Brawler attack hits, which is coming out in Zero in the Vanquisher event after the nerfs have been applied, so there's literally no point in using it now. And yeah, not much to say here. Nara's never gotten effective draw triggers, so yeah, you can just literally play any draw you want. And did they ever get another? Oh yeah, they got this guy, and then they got an Eradicator version of this guy later on, and they got a crit for Eradicators that when it was retired by your card effect, allowed you to look at the top 3 for an Eradicator, which I don't know, maybe we'll see play somewhere down there. No, that crit was never useful because Eradicators were just bad after Break Ride format. Like, Eradicators would get support many times down the road, and all of it was awful, with the exception of Draconic Descendant Sigma. And not much to say here about the triggers otherwise. You just play 8 crits because crits are good in this format versus 0 where draws are better. And then you play 4 draws and 4 heals. And that is the deck in a nutshell. So yeah, it was pretty cool to see this deck do some test hands and just think about the old days of Vanguard before G came in and changed things for the better, I should say. Like, G has this, well, okay, nowadays G's look back a lot more fondly, but I remember a time where G was very not popular among older members of the Vanguard communities because of Stride coming in and making it more like Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a common complaint. I will admit that the addition of more cards to get for your deck drove up the expenses of deck building, which made some people quit because what was the point of playing this game, whose appeal was that it was cheaper than Yu-Gi-Oh! When the G zone started making the decks become expensive, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. Like, I remember some G decks got pretty pricey this time when I'm like, how much did I drop on Asha? Because it was definitely more than I care to think about it sometimes. Yeah, Asha was an expensive deck because waifu and main characters got status. The Shadows were always an expensive deck. Gears were up and down. Grand Blue was up and down. Naru's were never really expensive in G, but that's because they were often hit or miss as far as how competitive they were. But anyway, getting off track here. What's a deck from old formats that you remember playing and loving very dearly? And if you were to go back and play older format Vanguard, what deck would you play? In fact, what older formats would you play if older formats, tournaments and such happen? Because, like, if Yu-Gi-Oh! Can get to the point where formats like Goats, Teledad, and Edison can see widespread play, I can't see why not. I can't see Vanguard not doing the same summer down the road. Hell, when you look at WCC's channel and some of the tournament results too, they have had the occasional retro format deck pop up. Like, I remember seeing like a G format deck come up for years, and that was kind of neat. But anyway, that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, this is BlueStar899, yakking out.